Matthew chapter 7 is the third and final chapter on the Sermon on the Mount. It started back in chapter 5, and we're going to get some really famous statements from Jesus in this chapter. Here's the first one, verse 1. He says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged." Now, it's interesting because I think some Christians, some non-Christians even misinterpret this, and they think that this means that Christians are not supposed to make judgments, that Christians are not supposed to sort of step into someone's life if they're getting off track and sort of call them out on their sin and help them. That's actually not what Jesus is saying. As you read this, really what he's saying is, make sure that you deal with your sin first, and then you will see to deal with someone else and to help somebody else. So certainly he's not saying just shut your mouth and let someone else self-destruct. He's just saying don't be a hypocrite, deal with your sin so that you can help someone else deal with theirs. Now as we scroll down, he's talking about prayer here in verse 7. Keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be open to you. And so he's talking about not giving up in your prayer life. Maybe you've been praying for something and you get discouraged because you don't see any movement. You're not getting the answer you're looking for. Jesus would just say, just keep on seeking God. Keep on asking, keep on knocking, and see what God will do. As we scroll down here, this is probably one of the most famous statements of Jesus. It's called the Golden Rule. Here's how it reads in the New Living Translation. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. So there it is. There's the Golden Rule. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. And then he says this. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. And so that's important. What he means is everything in the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments, everything that you see in there. If you want to boil it down to one principle, here's the principle. Treat other people the way that you want to be treated. And you notice that all of the rules in the Old Testament boil down to relationships, right? Isn't the Golden Rule all about relationships? Like learn how to relate well to other people. Well, how would I be able to relate well to other people? Well, just treat them the way that you would want to be treated. Man, do you know how different the whole world would be if people lived by the Golden Rule? We'll talk more about that later through the book of Matthew. As we scroll down a little bit further, we see in verse 24, Jesus says, anyone who listens to my teaching, now he's winding up his teaching, his Sermon on the Mount. He says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. And so the visual here is, if you follow these principles that Jesus is laying out in these 3 chapters, then you'll have a solid foundation for the rest of your life. And really how true that is. Go back and read these passages and you'll see that it's great wisdom for living, for everyday living. And then it says in verse 28, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike their teachers of religious law. Because remember, the Pharisees and the Sadducees had been their teachers. They heard from the Pharisees and Sadducees, but they were missing the point. They were never teaching anything that was practically helpful or even really, to be honest with you, fundamentally true, because so much of their teaching was about hypocrisy. So much of their teaching was about the letter of the law instead of the spirit of the law. And as a result, there was no freedom. But Jesus comes, this carpenter, this untrained religious leader who somehow has this mysterious wisdom, like he has a sort of like a personal relationship with the Father, which he does, right? Because he's the Son. He came from God. And so he has this wisdom beyond his years or beyond his education. And he's got all these fishermen, regular people following him. And he's teaching these things that just simply make sense. And so he had real authority because he was from God. And he was teaching just simple, true biblical principles. So you're ready to read Matthew chapter 7. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 8.